It's not like I'm the most famous person in the world. If you're famous, for the life of me, I don't understand why any famous person would ever be on Twitter. It doesn't matter what famous person I've come across in the street, I don't think I've ever shouted. The image we have of a famous person often bears no relation to them. Whenever I went to England I always see the man inside George Best. I knew that George, not the famous person with his troubles on the outside. I feel like everyone has the right to privacy, even if you're the most famous person in the world. I love photography. I fell in love with photography, I think, because it was my own thing. It wasn't something I needed other people's permission to do. So, it was really freeing for me actually to be able to not be a famous person and just to take pictures. I don't necessarily view myself as a famous person. I look at like Tom Cruise or Julia Roberts and think to myself, now that's a celebrity. There is less pressure as a character actor. It generally means that you will be acting for all of your life, which is my intention. It is not my intention to just be a rich and famous person. That would be pretty boring. I think Dutch people are very sober. I don't know if it's the right word. Like, you have the most famous person walk by some Dutch people, and they're like, oh, hello. And they maybe take a photo, but most of the time, they'll respect you and leave you alone. And if you go to some other countries they will literally mob you, go crazy. In terms of being a famous person, it hasn't changed anything. It's not important for me. When I do read, it tends to be serious books like autobiographies, and if I've met a famous person, I'll read up on them. I didn't necessarily want to be famous growing up, but I knew I would be a good famous person because I'm not offended if somebody comes up to me and knows things about me and wants to engage me in a conversation. Usually, when people hear my last name, before they really get to know me or work with me, there's probably a lot of preconceived notions that come with that, and I imagine most of them aren't good. Because for every wonderful second generation of a famous person, there's people that aren't that way, more entitled people. It's so awesome to be a part of something that is successful not because there's a famous person in it or because it's a revival of something, but because it's so fresh and original. I don't have the life of a famous person, but I do feel like I've been able to connect with a lot of people. I am entitled to my privacy. People say, no, you're not entitled to your privacy because you married a famous person and you have Instagram. Well, that's not really true. I grew up watching Amy in Enchanted. I was told that if you had to meet your first famous person you'd be lucky if it were Amy Adams. I think it's useful, as a famous person, to have as little separation between the perception of you and how you really are, because otherwise I'd be sitting here thinking I'm keeping secrets, and wondering when you're going to find out. What got me motivated was my dad's idea that I go to Morehouse College in Atlanta. It's an all-black, all-male school. Martin Luther King went there. The most famous person in my class was Spike Lee, and I really caught fire. I was so inspired by the people around me that I went from C's and D's to straight A's by the time I left. The excitement for me lies not so much in interviewing the hard-to-get famous person, but the person whom you are about to discover. You know, like maybe the character actors who are just coming into their own and you're realizing how great they are. I think that as soon as you think of yourself as a famous person or anything like that, you're objectifying yourself in some weird way. I'm not thirsty. I'm not a pop star. I don't want to reign over all forever. I don't want to be famous. It makes me feel sick, the thought of being a famous person. It's just not me. I have a great job writing for The Office. But, really, all television writers do is dream of one day writing movies. I'll put it this way, at the Oscars the most famous person in the room is, like, Angelina Jolie. At the Emmys the huge exciting celebrity is Bethany Frankel. You get what I mean. Whenever you're the child of a famous person, you get judged in odd ways because of that. I'm like a famous person to some people, not to everybody. I want to be big. I do not take any pleasure whatsoever in being a famous person. A famous person to themselves, they don't get up in the morning and think, I'm famous. I'm not famous to me. Famous is a perception. I was getting a lot of editorial, as in lots of pages in Vogue, but it's far more important to get your dresses on the back of a famous person. Charlotte Rampling in Bruce Oldfield. That sells. When you're in a relationship with a very famous person, you have to make compromises. Quite frankly, I didn't become an actor to become a movie star. I have never dreamed about being the most famous person on the planet. I just want to do really good work. It seems unfair that anyone can set up on Twitter using my name, or the name of any famous person, without any checks at all. I'm not an impressionist as such, and I never will be, so the sketches where I was supposed to be a famous person probably weren't my best work. As a famous person you think how you're gonna end it, get away and have a normal life. A lot of stuff doesn't faze me. I think it's because I was brought up in a small town, and normally, when you're from a small town, when you see a famous person, you'd be like, my God. This never happens, but I've always kind of been like nonchalant. I suppose it's whether you want to be a famous person, or whether you want to be an actor. You have to decide what your priorities are. Great actor, huge star. Sometimes, the two walk hand in hand. Most of the time, they don't. My idea of a good picture is one that's in focus and of a famous person. I'm willing to make compromises based on someone I think is the one, but I think it's psychologically important to people when they're famous to be the only famous person they know. I'm the poorest famous person in the country. I'm right on the edge of getting another movie. It's between me and a famous person. The studio said they're thinking about going with somebody with a name. I said, that's great, because I have one. I'm not cut out to be a famous person. I can't do my hair and makeup well enough. The most famous person in my phone is Lindsay Lohan. We starred in Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen together in 2004 and we've stayed in touch. It isn't false modesty when I say this, but although I am supposed to be a famous person it doesn't mean anything to me. I just sit at home and work. I think when anyone says you look like a famous person you fiercely deny it, and then go around hoping other people will say it, too. I am not a famous person at home, I'm just a guy here. I'm a father, I'm a companion, I'm a human being. I am not a public figure in my house, I am not a celebrity. I am not a famous person to myself, I am just a guy. As with any moderately famous person, footballers are the source of much gossip. In fact, I'd go as far as to say they are targeted. The fun part as their partner is not knowing who, or what, to believe. I don't want to name drop, but Russell Crowe is the most famous person in my phone. I don't see myself as a famous person. I mostly go under the radar, which is fantastic because I would not be a good famous person. No one teaches you how to be a famous person, no one teaches you how to be a role model. It's something you have to do on your own. Visit our website for more quotes, quoting.com.